Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Pravishno Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Shrotra Shada Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Pravishno Vishnupada Srila Gorkishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Pravishno Vishnupada Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Pravishno Vishnupada Vaishnava Sarvabhaum Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री गौर वैष्णव गुरुवर्ग की जय। गंगा माई की जय। जमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glories to Samudavaris Hare Krishna. All glories to Samudavaris Hare Krishna. All glories to Samudavaris Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sangam na kuryat pramada sujatu. Yogasya param paramarurukshuhu. Matsevaya pratilabdhatma labho. Vadanti yani rayadvaramasya. Sangam na kuryat pramada sujatu. Yogasya param paramarurukshuhu. Matsevaya pratilabdhatma labho. Vadanti ya nirayadvaramasya. Sangam na kuryat pramada sujatu. Yogasya param paramarurukshuhu. Matsevaya pratilabdhatma labho. Vadanti yani rayadvaramasya. Sangam na kuryat pramada sujatu. Yogasya param paramarurukshuhu. Yatsevaya pratilabdhatma labho. Vadanti yani rayadvaramasya. Sujatu. Yogasya param paramarurukshuhu. Matsevaya pratilabdhatma labho. Vadanti yani rayadvaramasya. Sangam na kuryat pramada sujatu. Yogasya param paramarukshu Sevaya pratilabhatmalabho Adantiyanyayadvaramasya Sangam na kuryat pramadasa jatu Yogasya param paramarukshu Sevaya pratilabhatmalabho Adantiyanyayadvaramasya Sangam, association. Na, not. Kuryat, one should make. Pramadasu, with women. Jatu, ever. Yogasya, of yoga. Param, culmination. Param, topmost. Arurukshuhu, one who aspires to reach. Mat sevaya, by rendering service unto me. Pratilabdha, obtained. Atma labha, self-realization. Vedanti, they say. Yaha, which women? Niraya, to hell. Dvaram, the gateway. Asya, of the advancing devotee. Translation. One who aspires to reach the culmination of yoga and has realized his self by rendering service unto me should never associate with an attractive woman, for such a woman is declared in the scripture to be the gateway to hell for the advancing devotee. Purport. The culmination of yoga is full Krishna consciousness. This is affirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. A person who is always thinking of Krishna in devotion is the topmost of all yogis. And in the second chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is also stated that when one becomes freed from material contamination by rendering devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can at that time understand the science of God. Here the word pratilabdhatma labha occurs. Atma means self, and labha means gain. Generally, conditioned souls have lost their Atma, or self, but those who are transcendentalists have realized the self. It is directed that such a self-realized soul who aspires to the topmost platform of yogic perfection should not associate with young women. In the modern age, however, there are so many rascals who recommend that while one has genitals, he should enjoy women as much as he likes, and at the same time he can become a yogi. In no standard yoga system is the association of women accepted. It is clearly stated here that the association of women is the gateway to hellish life. The association of women is very much restricted in the Vedic civilization. Out of the 4 social divisions, the brahmachari, vanaprastha, and sannyasi, 3 orders, are strictly prohibited from the association of women. Only the grihasthas, or householders, are given license to have an intimate relationship with a woman, and that relationship is also restricted for begetting nice children. If, however, one wants to stick to continued existence in the material world, he may indulge in female association unrestrictedly. Translation again. One who aspires to reach the culmination of yoga and has realized his self by rendering service unto me should never associate with an attractive woman, for such a woman is declared in the scripture to be the gateway to hell for the advancing devotee. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatinirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratashe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, we're continuing our discussion of the section of Srimad Bhagavatam. A little bit of a heavy section, but we'll discuss a little bit of this. Actually, when I read sections like this, I always think, in the morning we always say, Na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagadisha kamaye. And I think, well, we're reciting what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. I know in my mind, all I'm thinking is Dhanam Janam Sundarim Kavitam Va Jagadisha Kamaye, right? Not Dhanam, not Janam, right? Our hearts are filled with all of these desires. Actually, that's why we see in Gora Arti, especially we experience this, right? We sing Gora Arti every night. At least we try to. And when we sing it, we're singing all of these wonderful things, right? And we're singing about the wonderful, the Arati of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And who is there? Shiva, Shuka, Narad. All of these personalities are there, right? We're praying and we're singing about how ecstatic, right? Narahari is there with his chamara and engaging in this wonderful worship. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we're singing about all of these things happening. And we're imagining, wow, this is the wonderful engagement that is being arranged, right? But then we sing something right at the end. And I feel like sometimes it throws devotees off. We get a little bit confused. Because what do we sing right at the end of Gora Arti? Bhakti Vinoda Dekhe, right? Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he is seeing these things. And we're thinking, oh, wait a second. I thought I was describing these things, right? We're singing very nicely. This is the bhajan that I'm engaged in. I am engaged in worship of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Right? This is what we feel when we sing Gora Arti. But what do we sing at the end? We sing Bhakti Vinod Thakur. He is seeing all of these things. Right? He is engaged in all of these things. And so what do we see there? We see that actually we are not experiencing any of these things. I mean, is it the case? Maybe it is for some devotees. I know for most devotees, including myself, we are not seeing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's transcendental arti on the bank of the Ganga. Are we? We are not witnessing these things. We are not seeing Shiva, Shukadev, Narada. We are not seeing all of these personalities floating around, right? Engaged in all of these things. What are we seeing? We are seeing the objects of our senses. So we pray, Bhakti Vinod Dekhe, right? We pray that Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he is seeing all of these things. Actually, in a sense, whenever we're singing these bhajans, we are only singing for Guru's mercy, right? Because we are not seeing these things, but we know they are seeing them. And so we are simply praying for their mercy, that we one day might see these things. Does this make sense? We are saying this is the glory of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, that he is witnessing all of these things, right? And this is my fallen condition that I am not. And so I pray in this mood, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he is seeing these things, and this is his glory. And by his mercy, one day I will be able to see these things, but only by his mercy. So in the same way, sometimes we hear, I think yesterday the purport mentioned Yamunacharya, right? Saying, I spit at the very thought of these things. We can think, this is very heavy, right? We can only pray one day, right? That we'll have such conviction and attachment to the lotus feet of service to Guru, Gauranga and Gopinath. That we also will just naturally, spontaneously spit like that. In the meantime, when we recite such texts, we recite with the mood that one day this prayer will be heartfelt from me. One day I will be in such a mood, such a state. And so we hear this section's talking about Stri Sangha, right? Which is a heavy thing. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he discusses Stri Sangha, he actually says that association with women is not just association with women. It is also association with men who are attached to women. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it is not just simply one thing we must avoid. We must be so careful that we must even be 1 degree of separation away. Now I think texts like this are interesting, and I'll discuss this a little bit more as I keep on going. But I find sometimes we can fall into a trap then of, the great ills we hear today of misogyny and hatred of women when we hear texts like this. I actually think Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statement about even avoiding men who take too much association of women, right? Even avoiding them is necessary in our avoidance of Stri Sangha. I think that reveals something about the nature of what is actually being described here. Because if we are to avoid the association of even men who are too attached to the association of women, then I think there's something very clearly being elaborated upon here. It is not that women inherently are something dangerous. In fact, later on in the class I'll try to make perhaps the opposite point, right? But the issue is the way that the conditioned living entity tries to exploit the association of women that is being condemned here. Srila Prabhupada elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam actually says that all of these texts that we see discussing women, they're discussed this way because, of course, Bhagavatam is being spoken to Parikshit Maharaj. And the reverse is true for women. If Srimad Bhagavatam was being spoken to a woman, then it would be condemning the association of men, right? Because this is the nature of the material world, that there is a desire to exploit. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he actually said there is nothing wrong with noticing the beauty of a woman. But we'll be confused. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was such a staunch sannyasi, such a staunch celibate. He said, the reason why I still avoid then the association of women is because I will notice that beauty, and I will not think that this beauty belongs to Krishna. I will think that this beauty belongs to me. And this is why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said he avoids the association of women as a sannyasi, right? Not because there's something evil in women, but because there's something deeply evil within, well, of course, not himself. He is speaking from humility, but what is deeply evil within us, right? The desire to lord it over the material nature, to be the enjoyer, to be the controller. And so for this reason, we see these heavy condemnations. And for this reason, we see Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying that the avoidance of the association with women includes avoiding those people who are too attached with women, right? Men. How can men be the association of women? Men are the association of women because those men who too much are attached to the association of women are completely stuck in the Purusha mindset. We know in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, right? When we hear about the nature of Purusha, Prakriti, and all of these things, we hear what? We hear firstly that, well, the jiva is what? What is the jiva? There's Purusha, there's Prakriti. What is the jiva? The spirit soul. Prakriti. So it's a trick question, both answers are correct. So Prabhu anyone who would have answered would have been right? Because the jiva can be Prakriti and it can be Purusha. When we are completely conditioned, we think we are the Purusha, we are the doer, we are the enjoyer. Material reality exists for us to enjoy, right? And in that sense, we enter into the Purush mindset, right? But if we realize that the position that we have is not to enjoy, but to be enjoyed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Purushottam, then we realize we're actually Prakriti. So in this way, the danger of this association is that one actually sees man or woman. We read in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam so famously, right? Shukadev Goswami, he would run around and no one would act any differently, right? People would bathe and they would continue bathing around him, right? Because he did not perceive man or woman. The danger of the association of women isn't even in the existence of women. It is in the perception that there is man and there is woman. It is with this bodily identification. Now, why then do we hear all of this heavy condemnation if there is no inherent issue? Again, the issue is because we have created it in our conditioned state, right? And until that conditioned state is somehow disrupted, we cannot understand anything better. I was in Melbourne recently, and I was speaking one story, and I wasn't going to speak it here, but now I think it's relevant, and it's an interesting story. I heard it in Vrindavan. And there was once this couple. They were very much in love, young Grihastha couple, right? Deeply, deeply in love with each other. They were both disciples of Srila Narada Muni. And so Narada Muni, he would often come and visit them, and every time he would visit them, he would see so strong that attraction was there. So strong it was. All the time, the husband would always be meditating on the wife would always be meditating on the husband. So Narada Muni, he thought, this is perhaps a bit much. They're not progressing in their bhajan. All they're doing is they're meditating upon each other. So Narada Muni, he devised a plan. The next time he came to visit them, he turned up, and we know how he turns up. Narayan, Narayan, right? Like that, playing the veena. And he goes and he sits down. And of course, we know when sannyasis and gurus visit, right? They're treated very opulently. All the prasadam comes out, right? And it's served very nicely. So during this time, the wife, she was preparing all the items, and the husband, he was there sitting down, taking darshan, he paid Dandavat pranams, everything, right? You can say, Namo Vishnupataya Krishna Prasthaya Putale Srimate Narada Muni, iti namine, right? He prays his most humble respects unto his spiritual master, Narada Muni. And as he's there, Narada Muni, he says, you have pleased me very much in your service. I'm very much pleased with you. I will give you a great blessing, right? And so this disciple, he thought, I'm very happy. My spiritual master is giving me a great blessing. And Narada Muni, what did he say? He said, I will tell you who you were in your past life. And this disciple became ecstatic. This is interesting. We can already see here that he's rather conditioned. Something we see often. Devotees are so interesting. Oh, what was I in my past life? Right? I want to know all of the qualities that would happen in my previous life. Right? I remember once I was in Mayapur and I was walking through, and this one devotee, he grabbed my hand, right? Well, he was doing this sort of book distribution trick, and what he would do is he would say, I will do a palm reading if you take a book, right? So I thought, Jai, Brihad Nridanga ki Jai, right? And so he said, I will do it. And I thought, okay, I'll go along with this. Anyways, it was a book. He's a disciple of Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, so he was distributing some of those books, and I didn't have them, so I was actually eager to get the book. So I thought, okay, I'll get my palm read at the same time as well. So he read my palm, and he went through, and he said, oh, okay, you will die in this many years old. And then he said, in your past life, you drowned to death. So that's what he told me. I thought that was very interesting. So he's telling me all these details, and I thought, okay, Hare Krishna. Then I kept on walking down, and it was in festival time, so there's all these book distributors, selling all these different books. And there was this one devotee who I had befriended, a disciple of His Holiness Srila Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj. And he saw that I had my palm read, and I found out all these details. And he grabbed my palm, and And he said, oh Prabhu, I can also do palm reading. And I said, okay, Hare Krishna. So he looked at my palm and he went like this. And then he said, oh Prabhu, what your palm reading says is you should chant 16 rounds, follow 4 regulative principles, read Srila Prabhupada's books, and then you can go back home, back to Godhead in this lifetime. Haribol. So like this, he read out my palm, right? Actually, this should be our concern, right? Who cares? We've had so many births. Once we were Brahma, another time we were a worm, once we were some bacteria, right? Who cares, right? So many lives we've had, we've experienced every single flavor of material life. But so conditioned we are, oh, what was I in my last life? Anyways. So this disciple of Narad Muni, he was very, very excited to hear about his past life. And so Narad Muni, he said, in your past life, you were a great king. Bharat Maharaj, Uttanapad, all of these great kings, you were at the same caliber. Such a fantastic king you were. And the husband, right, this disciple, he thinks, oh wow, Jai, right? I was a great personality then and I'm a great personality now, right? And so he said, well surely then my wife, she would have been my queen, right? And Narad Muni says, oh, better not to discuss these things. And then the disciple now got curious, why is Guru Maharaj avoiding this? And he said, no, Guru Maharaj, I want to know. Who was my wife? In her previous life. And Narad Muni, he says, no, we shouldn't, it is not proper to discuss these things. And then again he says, no, Guru Maharaj, please, I'll give you any dakshina, I'll give you any service, please just tell me, who was my wife in her previous lifetime? And then Narad Muni, he says, okay, I will tell you, on one condition, you do not mention it to anyone. And so this disciple says, okay, Gurudev. And then Narad Muni, he says, in her past life, your wife was a street dog. She would walk the streets and she would go around everywhere. We all know street dogs, especially in this couple, they were living in India, right? Street dogs in India are not maybe, in the West, if you say, oh, your wife was a dog, you'd say, oh, what an elevated birth, right? Dogs and cats, and at least in Australia, they're treated better than, they're treated better than some people are treated, right? I remember I had some friends in high school and they were very rich and they would buy new clothes every day for their dog. They would dress the dog up very nicely, very opulently. But of course street dogs in India are not like that. We know they're diseased, they're suffering, they're going around, right? And so Narad Muni, he says, I know it's very hard to believe because the husband, he's completely in shock. On his face there's complete denial that this could be the case, right? And so with this complete denial, Narad Muni, he says, actually you can see there's still some sanskar left. Sometimes, when no one else is looking, your wife, she will sometimes lick a foot of a person. Because she still has that sanskar, that impression. We know the street dogs, they go around and they lick feet, right? Still she has this impression on her soul, right? That she will lick a foot. Now the husband is completely bewildered, what's going on here? So then he said, okay, very much. Did Dandavat pranams and then he left, right? Completely bewildered and he's just thinking in his head, a dog. Anyways. So then the wife, she now comes, right? And she pays her obeisances and says, Gurudev, here I am, serving you. And Narad Muni, he says, you are such a great disciple of mine. You have pleased me so much with your service. I have decided to grant you a special blessing. And she says, oh, what is it, Gurudev? And he says, I will tell you about your past life. And so she says, oh, Gurudev, thank you for this mercy. Please tell me, who was I in my past life? And Narad Muni, he says, you were a great princess. And being a great, great princess, every single man on earth wanted to marry you. All the great kings wanted the princes to be married to you. She says, wow. And then she says, surely my husband was one of those great princes, and he was the one that was finally chosen. And Narad Muni says, better not to discuss these things. Then she says, no, please Gurudev, tell me. I'll do any service, give you any dakshina. Please tell me. Narad Muni says, I really shouldn't be saying these things. Then she says, please Gurudev. And then Narad Muni says, okay. but only one condition. You promise not to tell anyone. She says, okay, Gurudev, I will promise. Then she said, your husband in his past life was a donkey. And not just any type of donkey. He was a donkey that didn't carry gold. He didn't carry any items of a king. He carried salt. He was a salt merchant's donkey. And being a salt merchant's donkey, he would just carry and labor until he died, some insignificant death. They didn't do anything with his body. Just one day they were traveling here and there from market to market. Then he died, and they just let the body rot. She was shocked. She couldn't believe it. And so Narad Muni, he said, I know it's very hard to believe, but in fact there is a little sanskar left from this previous birth. This sanskar is that whether you believe it or not, because he carried so much salt, and because he labored so far, the bottom of his feet, they taste a little bit like salt still. They have that little bit of an impression left. So in this way, she was completely bewildered. Anyway, so Narad Muni, he leaves the house. And as he leaves the house, he is smiling to himself. And that day, this Grihastha couple, no more lovebirds. They're completely just thinking, I can't believe it. I was a king, and now I'm married to a donkey. Like this, they're thinking. Completely disturbed. Anyway, so that night, they've gone to sleep. Both of them can't sleep. They're pretending to sleep, but all they're thinking is, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And then in the middle of the night, the wife, she thinks this is too much. Too much. He knows my husband is asleep. I will figure this out now. So she goes quietly. She goes, and she thinks this is very weird, very disgusting, but I have to confirm. And she sticks her tongue out to taste whether there's salt on the feet of the husband. And when she goes, the moment the tongue touches the foot, he jumps up and he says, I knew it, you were a dog. And she says, I knew it, you were a donkey. And like this, they start yelling at each other and she says, I was a king, I was a princess, you're a donkey, you're a dog. And like this, they're arguing and they're fighting, and they're arguing and they're fighting. Like this, they're going. And then complete chaos is going on in their house. They're yelling, I knew it, what am I doing with someone like you? Like this, they're yelling. And Narad Muni, he's outside. We know Narada Muni, right? He adds the masala to all pastimes, right? He is the one who is stirring it up. And so Narada Muni, at that point, he enters into the house. And he says, stop. And he said, actually, you were not a donkey in your previous life. And you were not a dog. Nor were you a princess, nor were you a king. And actually right now, you are not a husband, and you are not a wife. He says, you are a spirit soul, a jiva, a servant of Krishna, but you have identified as all of these things that you are not. And then he spoke Srimad Bhagavatam to them. Now what is the point of this story? Besides it being a funny story, right? The point that's made is that so much we can be bewildered into these attachments, into these identifications, that they completely absorb us. We read in the Ishopanishad, right? Atmaha, right? The killer of the soul. And this can be confusing. How can anyone kill the soul, right? Krishna himself says it cannot be cut, it cannot be wet, it cannot be burnt. So how then can the soul be destroyed? How then can the soul be killed? It can be killed, it can be destroyed in the sense that we can identify so much with the material covering that it is almost completely hidden, right? It fully exists still, but so much we are identifying with our body that our soul is completely ignored, and then it is practically killed. It is practically hidden. And so we see this identification, it is the root of our suffering. Thus we read, Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, what is he? He is our Rasik Acharya, right? All of this Rasik knowledge is being held in his books. We read in Nectar of Devotion, right? All of these sweet, intimate exchanges, right? Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, right? This ocean of the nectar of Bhakti Ras. And so devotees get very excited about this. And forget about Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rupa Goswami, he wrote another book afterwards, Ujjvala Nilamani. where he just focuses on the mood of the gopis, and that book is very elevated. Once, some ISKCON devotees, they were going to one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, right? Because they were thinking, oh, if we go, we will get guidance on these higher things, right? We will get guidance on these very, very elevated topics. And so they went to this godbrother, and they said, oh, in Ujjvala Nilamini, it says this about the gopis. How do we understand it? And they were thinking, oh, we will jump into these very high things. And this godbrother of Srila Prabhupada, one of the most senior disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, what did he say? This godbrother, he said, oh, I don't know. I have not read the book. So Ujjvala Nilamini, very, very elevated rasic book. Not a book that sadhakas, especially at the beginning levels, like myself, should be reading, right? So, but we can see, Rupa Goswami here, he has captured so much rasa, right? And all devotees, we love it, right? Everyone loves Radhashtami class. No one wants to hear. I remember I was hearing a class by Shubhag Swami Maharaj. He spoke on Upadeshamrita for Radhashtami, about sense control. I've heard a similar thing from many senior Vaishnavas. No one wants to hear that. Everyone wants to hear Srimati Radharani's Born Blind, wants to hear about the rasic relationships between Radharani and Krishna, right? Everyone wants to hear the sweet rasa, right? Everyone, oh wow, this is what everyone wants. And of course, it's natural. We do want to hear it. Ultimately, that's what the jiva wants. But we can tell that our taste for these rasic pastimes is conditioned. Because that same Rupa Goswami, who wrote Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, also wrote the Upadesh Amrita, right? The nectar of instruction. And so, if one hears Vacha Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jihva Vegam, Udara Pastha Vegam, Metan Veganyo Vishaheta Dhiraha, Sarvam Apimam Prithivim, Vashishyat, right? If somebody hears this and does not hear nectar, then there is some material taste that is there, right? Because that same Rupa Goswami, who was given the highest form of nectar, so high that even senior Vaishnavas who have been meditating on Krishna, who have been chanting their rounds for over half a century, right? If those same devotees say that this is too rasic, too high for me, right? The great Acharya who has written this also calls this Amrita. We should think sense control is Amrita, even though we don't seem to think of it that way. Sense control is nectar, right? To understand that we are not this body is nectar. And if we do not drink that nectar, then we will not understand any of these other things. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur both make this point in their Nectar of Instruction commentaries. They say that this sense control, sorry, a bit of a heavy topic, but this sense control, right? It is not bhakti. It is not even part of bhakti. It is not even something that will result in bhakti. But it is essential for bhakti. Because the Puranas say, how will Mukunda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appear in a heart where there is no place for him? What does this mean? If the heart is filled with all of these desires, there is no place for Mukunda to appear in. And so we must clear the heart. We must prepare the heart for bhakti to appear. And therefore, the Upadeshamrita, the nectar of instruction, it is built upon this principle of sense control. Right? So the sense control, it is very, very important. That's why sometimes we talk about Bilva Mangal Thakur, right? We talk about a Jamil, right? We talk about, they're engaged in all of these things, right? But that's alright, because they become a devotee anyways, right? And to a degree that's true. We should never, right? We should never underestimate the power of bhakti. But we should also not underestimate the power of our own conditioning. A Jamil, Bilva Mangal Thakur, when they understood the nature of things, what happened? They instantly took up to devotion. They instantly abandoned these things, right? So we see here, yes, they set an example that one can be attached to things and then grow into Krishna consciousness, right? But what was that example? They've understood this and now they've abandoned it. Bilva Mangal Thakur, Ajamil. These are great personalities to be emulated. So then, why are we emulating them? We are emulating them because they have demonstrated this principle. Stri Sangha ultimately is not even the association of women. It is the constant identification as a man, and not a man in the bodily level, but a man on the jiva level. We think we are the Purush, right? We think we're the controller. We think we're the enjoyer. And thus, because we think that, all of these things become so dangerous. And then thus, they become the gateway to hell for advancing devotees. So we then see Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as I was mentioning earlier, right? What does he pray? Na dhanam na janam na sundarim, right? Kavitam ba jagadish kamaye, right? I do not want any of these things, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prays. And why does he not want them? We see in the Shikshashtakam a nice progression. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says different levels of the Shikshashtakam line up to different levels of spiritual understanding. Na dhanam na janam na sundarim, this is on the level of ruchi, right? This is on the level, there is some taste, right? If one engages in sadhana with the mood of pranada pisunichena, tarora pisahishnana, manina, manadena, kirtaniya sadaharihi. If one engages with this humble mood, then eventually one might become somewhat qualified to have some taste for the holy name, right? I remember once I asked one devotee, what is a symptom that I'm having taste for chanting so that I can know? And he said, you're not falling asleep while chanting your rounds. And I thought, oh, I fell asleep chanting my rounds this morning. So I thought it was very fitting. So ruchi, taste, it is not such a low platform. But we see, right? Na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam ba jagadisha kamaye. What comes next? What do we hear in Shikshashtakam? What does Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu discuss? Ainam Latanuja Kinkara. Right? So what does he say? He says, I simply wish to become your kinkara, right? Your servant. Right? Actually, kinkara, we can understand, one way of understanding it is kara means to do, right? In Sanskrit. And kim means what, right? So kinkara means somebody who does whatever you want, right? So this is the level of surrender we're seeing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is having, right? He's saying, whatever you want me to do, I will do it, right? So we see here something very interesting. We know there is a Swarup Lakshana and there's a Tatastha Lakshana, right? There's an inherent characteristic, an internal characteristic, and there's an external characteristic of everything, right? The internal is the essence. And what is the essence of that taste for the holy name? Ohituki bhakti, right? We wish to have the taste for the holy name so that we can have causeless devotional service, right? This is the inherent nature of taste for the holy name, right? But what is the side effect of that? Nathanam najanam nasundarim, right? We no longer desire any of these things. Our heart is no longer filled with these desires. So we understand the difference. One is inherent. If we are chanting the holy name, right, the inherent nature of it is that we will have taste for bhakti and we will have a desire for bhakti. And desire for bhakti, in a sense, is itself bhakti, right? In Harinam, we have both the sadhana and the sadhya. We have the goal and we have the means to attain the goal. Why do we chant? So that we can have taste for chanting. So, in this way, we see that the internal characteristic of bhakti, of chanting, right, is that we wish to attain bhakti. But the natural result of that is that we must also lose attachment to all of these things. That's why actually at the beginning of the Shikshashtakam, what do we hear? Cheto darpanam marjanam, right? We are hearing here about all of the faults, all of the many temptations of the material world, right? And of course we know in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, right? Arjuna is very confused. Krishna, what are you talking about? What are you saying, right? You're telling me to engage in all this ghastly activity. And I always feel comforted whenever I read the beginning of the 3rd chapter because Chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita is very confusing, right? And I'm very happy to see that Arjuna is confused as well. And so Arjuna says, can you clarify this for me, Krishna? And so Krishna says, okay, yeah. And he gives 2 reasons why somebody should engage in karma yoga, right? What is the first one? Yes, so that's one of them, right? It's like a circle, actually. There's 2 reasons coming to the same conclusion. So one is that we must set an example, even if we are purified. And the other one is that if we are not purified, we will not be able to engage in meditation and all of these things. Actually, what is the destination of the karma yogi? The destination of the karma yogi is not to do any, it's not like jnana yoga or ashtanga yoga where we say, oh, this paramatma realization, this and that. The destination of a karma yogi is to perform another form of yoga, right? It is purification before reaching a different platform. So, Krishna, he says, on the one hand, you are not purified enough to perform another type of yoga. Therefore, perform this karma yoga to be purified. On the other hand, he says, even if you are qualified to perform another form of yoga, set a proper example. And if you set a proper example, then other people will become qualified as well. Like this is the circle, right? Chapter 3 is circular. And then it comes to Arjuna's question. And Arjuna's question is, what is this force that impels us to engage in sinful activities? Because Arjuna will think, right? Krishna, you're making such a big deal that I'm not even able to engage in these yogic processes. Such a big deal. And then you're saying that even if I can engage in them, these forces that stop people from engaging in yogic processes are so powerful that I must make sure that other people are not bewildered. So in this way we see the 2-pronged structure, right? And this leads a natural question. What is so powerful about the world that so much purification is needed? And then Krishna says it is lust alone, right? Calm. That is what does this. So we see karma yoga, therefore varnashram, and all of these things. What is their point? Their point is to purify oneself, right? And what do we see in Shikshashtakam? Cheto darpanam marjanam. As we're describing, Shikshashtakam, it's sequential, right? It's going through these levels of bhakti. The very first words are saying that which we can receive through performing our varnashram duties, through performing karma yoga. Simply by engaging in this sankirtan, we've already achieved it, right? Cheto darpanam marjanam. The first level of engaging in the sankirtan movement gives us all the benefits of any other process. So this is the glory of sankirtan. Of course, sankirtan, we know, sankirtan, right? We say it's kirtan together, right? Some in a group. But some can also mean complete. It can mean purna. So this is not just any kirtan. It is not kirtan of Durga. It is not kirtan of any demigod, of Indra or Brihaspati, as much as we respect those personalities. Sankirtan means the complete kirtan of the complete personality. And who is the complete personality? Krishna. Purna Bhagavan, Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. So, by engaging in this sankirtan, in this chanting of Krishna's holy name, we are purified of all of these things. And so we do not need to worry so much about varnashram deliberations, about karma yoga, in order to overcome this obstacle that we are describing, right, in this purport, in this text, right, that we've been discussing. That obstacle from vacho vegam, manasakrota vegam. Actually, we're not so concerned with that. Firstly, because the holy name is much more merciful than any other process, but also because good luck being a Ashtanga yogi, right? Good luck performing tapasya. We see this in Brahma, right? In yesterday's purport, we heard the example of Haridas Thakur, right? And when the prostitute came to him, was he captivated? No. Was he bewildered? No. But what do we hear? In the form of Brahma, Brahma lusted after his daughter, right? So, how do we understand? Haridas Thakur, he is Brahma, right? The difference is that Brahma was not engaged in the Sankirtan movement of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but Haridas Thakur was. Right? Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Right? Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Right? There all victory is found, and there Haridas Thakur, conquering over all things. Right? So in this way we see, we are not so concerned with tapasya, right? Brahma, he did a lot of tapasya. So much tapasya, he was able to what? Hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And yet that was not enough. But the chanting of Krishna's holy names, that is what allowed him to persevere. So, in this way, we hear many things. I won't discuss too much longer because I'm realizing now it's 8:50, but I have a few more points I just wish to quickly make. Interestingly enough, our previous acharyas, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they actually say, Na Thanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Bhajagadisha Kamaya. They actually say that these different things are referring to the four goals of life described in Shastra. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. They say all of them are actually found in this text, Na Dhanam Na Janam Na Sundarim. And so they make the point, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is not just rejecting simple low-level attachment, but all attachment. Attachment to dharma, attachment to artha, attachment to kama, and attachment to moksha, which again is reiterating this point. We are not concerned with processes of liberation. We are not concerned with any of these other things, right? We are concerned with Krishna consciousness. And that is why, now to come back to the point I wanted to make at the beginning, attitudes of misogyny that is sometimes justified by texts like this, of hatred towards women, of restriction of women, of disrespect towards women, are not proper, right? Because actually, if we see Vaishnavi, and we think we are seeing a woman, we are very, very degraded in our position, right? We are actually committing a great offense. As Upadeshamrita says, we should not notice the material features of a devotee, right? Of course, that does not mean that we should not be, of course, observing rules in terms of dealings and exchanges and all, of course, because we are not actually on an elevated level where we just see the soul, right? But if we think, oh, this person is a woman, and so thus I can denigrate them, or thus I can neglect them, or thus I can, well, neglect in the terms of dismiss, right? Then that is an offense, because we're considering the bodily nature of the devotee, right? Again, restrictions like this, they are not discussions on the nature of others, they are discussions on the nature of ourselves, right? We have the propensity to exploit, and thus we must avoid, right? Not that there is anything else there, right? And so we see that we should not at any point neglect or dismiss the devotee, right? No matter who they are, no matter what background they are from. There was once one Vaishnav, he's described in Bhaktimala, Bhaktamala. We hear this book Bhaktamala often, right? People cite it, you'll say, oh, there's a story here and there. There's so many books called Bhaktamala, right? But this one is the one that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur quoted from, so we can say it's a bona fide publication, right? And this story, it describes this one Vaishnav, and he was very famous for his Vaishnav dealings. And every single day he would perform celebrations celebrating all of the local Vaishnavas in the area. And he would bring all of them and he would feed them prasad. And he would wash their feet. And washing their feet, right, he would always take the charanamrit of their lotus feet and he would drink it. He would tell his disciples, when you are a very senior devotee, you will have the blessing, you will have the opportunity of drinking the water that has washed the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. And so one day, as they were doing this, they were washing all the feet, right? As they were passing the bowl around, the Guru, he began to drink the water that had washed the feet of the Vaishnavas. And he sort of tasted it, right? And he said, something tastes wrong here. This doesn't taste as ecstatic as the water of the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas normally tastes. And he told his disciples, have you done anything different? Have you neglected any Vaishnav? And then so they said, right? They said, Guru Maharaj, actually one of the Vaishnavas, he is a leper, right? And because he has leprosy, we didn't want to wash his feet and give you the water. And instantly the Guru, he said, you go, you wash, and then you bring it back. So they went, and they washed his feet. And then he honored that Charanamrit. And honoring that Charanamrit, he said, now I am ecstatic. Now I am satisfied, because I have had the water that has washed the lotus feet of all of the Vaishnavas. Right? Of course, this is a very high level thing. I'm not saying we should try to emulate this, right? But rather, this is a principle to be kept in mind, right? We are here to honor all devotees of all bodily situations. And when we must, of course, avoid the association of some, we should always think the fault is with me, the issue is with me, right? There's some devotees that sometimes I avoid, right? Because maybe they'll sometimes speak about things that are perhaps not so Krishna conscious, right? But I try my best to, as much as I struggle to, not to think that, oh, they are speaking prajalpa, oh, they are speaking aparad. Instead, I try to think, they're speaking whatever they're speaking, and I start committing prajalpa in my mind when I hear them speak. I start committing aparad in my mind when I hear them speak. And for that reason, I am not qualified enough to have their association, right? I am not at a level of spiritual advancement where I have the purity to associate with them and appreciate them like the bumblebee does, taking the nectar. I struggle to find the nectar in them, and thus it is my problem, not theirs. Anyways, we can speak longer, but I really don't want to hold everyone up for prasadam. So I think Prabhu, you had a question?
Just a couple of clarifications.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to just ask them together or just one?
Just us together. I'll see if I can, yeah.
Prabhu, the word translated in synonyms,
Mm-hmm.
Pramadas with women, does it in any way indicate pramada, danger? Is there in any way related to that?
I'm not sure.
Also,
Yeah.
if I may ask you, which Sanskrit word from the shloka represent the translated word attractive? And also, how does a Pandita conceive the whole subject matter?
So just with the first one, I'm not sure. With the second one, Prabhupada's translations are not meant to be some literal thing where, right, Prabhupada he's giving the mood, he's giving the essence, right? Translation is never something where it's word for word, right? If I say it's raining cats and dogs, and somebody translates that into Hindi, and they quite literally say cats and dogs are falling from the sky, they'll say this man is a madman, right? He's crazy, right? Translation is about translating the feeling and the mood, right? So Prabhupada, he is conveying the feeling and the mood of Srimad Bhagavatam. So sometimes we will struggle to find an exact word. It's not because it's not there. It's because we're trying to convey what is being gotten at. And what is the point here? Again, the point is that attraction is the principle that is being condemned here, right? And thus Prabhupada is clarifying attraction. Does that make sense? Because the principle is that principle of attraction, right? Okay. And the last one?
How does a Pandita perceive the whole subject matter? Like in Bhagavad Gita, we have heard Pandita Samdarshan.
Mm-hmm.
So how does he actually perceive that?
Perceive what subject matter? What's the...
About talking about Pramadas, like association.
Oh yeah, so that was the point that I was making, right? So on the conditioned platform, obviously, we restrict these things. Again, not because the fault is with anyone else, but with ourselves, right? We are unable to control our senses, and thus we avoid this association, right? We are unable to do these things. But on a higher level, one sees everything as just in the service of Krishna, right? That was the quote I made from, I'm pretty sure it's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada who says this, right? That on the highest level, a devotee can even notice the beauty of the material world in its fullness. But the reason why they're allowed to relish that is they see that beauty and they understand it's attached to Krishna. In so long as we see the beauty of the material world and think, oh, this is something that can belong to me, then we shouldn't relish the beauty of the material world, right? The material world then is, well, it's very material. We're using it materially, right? Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he writes in Jaiva Dharma, and then I'll wrap up on this point. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma, he discusses there's two types of grihasthas. There's the Grihastha who is very fixed in Varnashram. And then there's the Grihastha who is not, who is a little bit, how do I put it, from, we can say almost an uncultured, fallen background, right? Which is the majority of Grihasthas in the world today, right? And he says these two exist. And in the book, because we know Jaiva Dharma is a question and an answer, right? So the question gets risen, right? Who is greater? The Grihastha who follows the Vedic system or the one who doesn't? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, we're expecting, of course, the Grihastha who follows Varnashram, right? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says the Grihastha who is more attached to Krishna, right? He is the greater of the two. So actually all of this is fulfilled simply by attachment to Krishna. So how does the Pandit, how does the realized soul see things, right? They see everything in relation to Krishna. Every rule and regulation is only there to stop us from seeing the world not in relationship to Krishna, which is of course the platform of 99.5% probably, right, of people attempting Krishna consciousness, which is why we're so strict with it. I do want to clarify that point. At no point I'm saying we shouldn't be strict with our principles. What I'm saying is the point of that is at no point actually to control our senses or anything. The whole point to control our senses is that so we can see the world in relationship to service to Krishna. Does that make sense? Okay. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnaya Bhutale Shanti Radha Govinda Kosati Namini Namse Brahmani Devi Gorman Chani Nirishesha Srinivati Krame Chana Nishtarini.